by way of an extension of that introduction, Prasanna has, of course, been a theatre director, but for the last 4 years, he's also been at the forefront of a handloom satyagraha, which is an all-India movement, and it initially began during the final months of the second UPA, when the government was trying to redefine handloom in a way that would collapse the distinction between handloom and powerloom altogether. And the distinction is key to maintain for various reasons. And there's a handloom reservations bill that sets aside about 21 articles of clothing as exclusive for the production in the handmade sector. That's routinely violated. This activism that started around that demand has evolved around newer demands. Most recently, a demand to not impose the GST on products made in the handmade sector, a new term that's come up, which is inclusive of handloom plus other products. But this wasn't a mere economic struggle, in the course of which we saw a discussion that was trying to complicate the policy horizon, if you will, and trying to say the present is not as completely foregone in terms of the direction in which it's headed, and also trying to make visible a certain past to make arguments for the continued relevance of looking at cultures of work in the country with a renewed sense of critical appreciation. Over the last 2 years, he's been writing a fortnightly column in Prajavani, Karnataka's leading Kannada daily, which I've been fascinated by because they try to work with an awareness of the blind alleys that our ideological discussions have led us into, and try to somehow steer out of certain predictable routes that discussions take. But also trying to deprivilege the urban in relation to the rural, also the industrial versus the agriculture. And a lot of his writings get into texts that are not normally brought into in economic discussions. And that for me has been promising as means of overcoming the religious and secular divide in fashioning a criticism of our times. Prasanna, thank you for coming here. Everyone is intrigued by the title, so let us start with that. What is Hey Ram, and what are you planning to do with this, which is a slogan for a movement that's about to start next week? There's a mic in front of you. Yeah.
Friends, I'll take a little while to introduce the subject to you. We will be discussing Ram. Then why say, Hey Ram? I need to give you a little background. The popular notion about Ram and his attachment to Indian politics happened from the late 80s, when Bharatiya Janata Party took the slogan of the Ram Mandir. That's what most people think. But actually Ram's attachment to the formation of the Indian state, the formation of Indian politics is much older. For example, in the early 20th century, the peasant movement was started in India by people who took the name of Ram. They took Ram as an icon to start the peasant movement in India. Baba Ramchandra, a very well-known, very old peasant leader, early peasant leader from Bihar, used the name of Ram. After that, in the freedom movement, they took the name of Ram, and this was firmed up by Gandhiji, of course. Gandhiji actually defined the icon very, very precisely. Gandhiji, not just intellectually, but through lifestyle, defined Ram as Gram Swarajya. Gandhiji, for example, the way he lived in ashrams, he built his ashrams, he shaped his ashrams. Gandhiji, for example, the way he shaped lifestyle in an ashram, the Shramadhan in an ashram, and various things, he was actually very clearly trying to say that Ram represents an administration which is a moral administration, an administration which is attached to the Gram Swaraj concept. Swaraj is the autonomous village, if you can say this. And then we got the freedom. We forgot Ram. I don't have to elaborate on how we forgot Ram. In 46, 47, for example, when the early meetings of the constitutional, the forming of the constitution was held, there was no mention of the village in the draft. And some of the Gandhians who were part of the committee raised objections and said, look, we are not even talking about the village. And Ambedkar was quite angrily said that, look, what is there to talk about the village? The village is a cesspool of corruption, it's a cesspool of impoverishment and everything. Then a lot of them protested and said, no, we can't say that, we have to introduce. And then Nehru came to Ambedkar's rescue and said, no, we will put Gram Swaraj in the directive principles of the constitution. Nehru, Ambedkar, and most of our politicians of the post-47 thing, they were not very attracted to the Gram Swaraj. They couldn't have been. I'm not even complaining that they were not. They were all looking towards building a modern India, an industrial India, and for them, the village remained. Gram Swaraj remained as part of one of the ministries and certain things that they did, but it did not really find the place that Gandhiji was wanting to find. Gandhiji wrote to Nehru. He writes to him in 46 and says that, look, now that I have publicly declared you as the heir apparent, as the leader of Congress, I want you to take up Hind Swaraj, he said. And Hind Swaraj is this document which Gandhiji produced in 1907, where, it is such a strong document that it was very, very criticized by many, many people, but Gandhiji did not change that. Hind Swaraj is the place where he actually defines, all these ideas of his. Nehru did not agree. He said, very mildly, of course, he respected Gandhiji very much. He loved Gandhiji very much, but he said, no, we can't do that. We have to build a modern India. In front of him was the Soviet state, in front of him was the whole world, the whole Western world, and in front of him was the great idea of science, of technology, of design, of architecture, of great artists and all that. So this was pushed into the background. After that, we know what happened. Gradually, everybody, all the politicians, all the political parties, all the bureaucrats started constructing only a legal India. They started making rules and regulations and constitutional things and all that. And the moral India was left to the temples and mosques and churches to handle. We so cleverly divided India that when you went to vote, for example, in an election, you went with a very clear notion that you're asking for road or a airport or a water line or whatever it is, and you are not going to ask about moral issues. To ask about moral issues, you will go to a completely different department, which is the Ram temple or the Allah's mosque or Jesus' church. This division, this amazingly idiotic division, actually created such a hopeless situation that the whole system became corrupt. A whole lot of us who were well-meaning people, honest people, could not really construct a well-meaning and honest society. Our lifestyles changed, our ministers changed, their bungalows changed, our bureaucrats changed, and we went on making the system bigger and bigger and bigger. Today the system is so big, we don't know what to do with it. We can only make it even bigger. So, on the one side, we have constructed a legalistic system. On the other side, we have made the moral system into an extremely symbolic and extremely backward, institution of right-wing politics, of all sorts of things. And then, towards the late 80s, suddenly Bharatiya Janata Party revived Ram. But this time as a confrontation. This time as a jhagda between Babar and Ram was brought back. The Ram Mandir was brought back. And the potent nature of Ram's image was so enormous that within a few years, from mere 2 MP seats, they grew to become 300 and odd MP seats. And the power was taken away by them. The difference between the earlier Ram and this other Ram is so vast. And in this country, we don't realize, for example, the greatest confrontation that happened did not happen between the Muslims and Hindus. The greatest confrontation happened between the two notions of Ram. It was a Ram Bhakt who killed Gandhiji. So it is in a sense, because 1947 Ram Mandir was not there, but in a sense, it was the Ram Mandir ideology which confronted the Gram Swarajya ideology and killed the Gram Swarajya ideology through the bullet. And that is when we heard this weak, voice of Hey Ram. Now, Hey Ram is this exclamation that came through the mouth of Gandhiji when he was confronted by violence. And Hey Ram or Oh Jesus or Ya Allah is the weak voice that comes out every day, everywhere, when a rape happens somewhere in some place, or when a farmer commits a suicide, and after that when the wife comes in and sees this body of the hanging person, she may say, Hey Ram, or Oh God, or Oh Jesus, or something. Now, this is a very, very weak voice, and this is a voice that is in complete contrast with Jai Ram. Because Jai Ram has a long past. So much so that it starts with freedom struggle again. But not as Jai Ram, but as Muhammad Ali Jinnah. See, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, at the end of the freedom struggle, when the freedom was about to come, realized that there is this tension amongst the Muslims that they may get engulfed by the majority Hindus and the majority Hindu rule. And he used this tension, he used this thing to build a political party. And a part of the Indian nation was taken away, a part of the Indian citizenry was taken away, and a separate state was formed. Now that whole thing is happening again. We are confronted with a situation which has openly declared Hindu Rashtra as their goal. For example, BJP is saying Hindu Rashtra is their goal. Now, I want to talk about it, not really to talk against BJP, but I want to understand this whole thing in the context of what I am saying here on. Now, what is Hindutva? I mean, what is Hindu Rashtra? We are already Hindu majority state. In fact, we have become even more Hindu majority after the partition of the country than before. Then where is the need for making it again, all over again, into a Hindu Rashtra? The need can only be felt in the sense that you have to distinguish the Hindu from the non-Hindu and treat the non-Hindu as a second citizen. Now, this, if it can happen, wonderful. But can it actually happen? Has it happened anywhere in the world, in any of the states where it has been tried? After all, this has been tried in many, many countries, in many, many times. It's not that we are trying it new. Pakistan is, of course, the immediate and our neighborly example where it collapsed within 3 months. Within 3 months, Jinnah fell ill, and even before he died, already the most extreme fundamentalist elements had taken over the administration, and Pakistan, the dream of building a secular Pakistan. Jinnah's declared dream was to build a secular Pakistan. It was smashed within 3 months. We've seen what happened in many states, Catholic states and Muslim states and Zionistic states and whatever. So the question is, what do we choose? You can't choose Shiva to Ram. You can't choose something else to Ram. You have to choose between the two Rams. If you don't agree with Hindu Rashtra, you have to choose this other Ram who was, built during the freedom movement from till 47. And I want to advocate for this for many reasons. I want to advocate for a Ram who represents Gram Swarajya, because today the biggest crisis that the Hindu or the Muslim is facing is the industrial culture and its ramifications. Whether it is pollution, whether it is environmental problem, whether it is any other thing, it is that which is actually facing us. So the tension that a Hindu feels, or the tension that a Muslim feels, or the tension that we feel that the culture is slipping away, the dharma is slipping away, or whatever is slipping away, all comes to this. We have become an excessively constructed civilization. We have become a civilization which is so completely removed from nature, so completely removed from life, that we all feel tense. And then this tension we want to put it onto a Muslim if I am a Hindu, if I want to put it onto a Christian if I am a Muslim, and etc. etc. So it has now come to the Indians to take Ram very quietly and very humbly away from the extremist position, not isolating even the people who have been followers of BJP or Congress or Janata Dal or communists or anything, and tell them that no, look, extremism will not work. We'll have to tell them that we'll have to take that Ram who actually tried to deconstruct this massive civilization into a small civilization. Now let's for a moment go back to Ramayana and try to understand what is Ramayana. In the entire gamut of great epics, there are many epics, not just in India but all over the world there are epics. There is no epic which makes civilizational construction as the theme of an epic. It's only in Ramayana that actually the whole epic is about the construction of a civilization. When you look at the metaphor of Sita and Ram, Ram is supposed to be Purusha and Sita is supposed to be Prakriti. And Prakriti means nature and Purusha means civilization or a civilized person. You see, what is a male thing, what is a male? A woman, when she becomes the Prime Minister, she becomes a male. The person who handles the social life, the person who handles the public life. So Purusha is that person who handles the public life. Purusha is that person who handles administration, who handles politics, who handles social life. And what Ramayana advocates is this extraordinary marriage, extraordinary love affair between the Purusha and the Prakriti. So Rama and Sita are actually not two individuals in a sense. They are two sides of the same thing. And Ramayana advocates a good civilization can only happen when the two are married so beautifully and so closely that it works. So according to Ramayana, anything that is not married as beautifully as Rama and Sita can only lead to a Ravana. There are many other implications. I can't really go into that today because I'm not really talking about Ramayana. But I want to focus on this issue of civilization. And today, the challenge before us is that of the civilization. Why are political parties failing? Because the crisis that is facing us is not just a political crisis, it's a civilizational crisis. A civilizational crisis which involves not just political solutions, a civilization crisis which needs both political and moral solutions. So in that sense, Rama becomes important. In that sense, Gram Swarajya, which Gandhiji advocated as the true Rama, becomes important, and we will have to go back to that idea, that dream, and start constructing this world.
I have a quick question. This need to work with religion, which many secular activists have felt for the last couple of decades. There's been a problem. Do you deal with it as a tactic? What if you yourself not a believer? The notion of belief. Does one have to be a believer to talk about Rama in the ways you're talking about? How have you thought about that relationship in your interest in working with Rama, the figure of Rama?
All of us are trained to be skeptical. Science is skeptical. Unless you ask questions, you cannot come to understand science. So skepticism is inbuilt and it is fundamental to our nature. But then this skepticism need not remain skeptical forever. We have started realizing in different ways. People have started responding in different ways to this problem of being skeptical and to arrive at faith in different ways. Simple people have come to simple solutions, but there are others who have come to more complex solutions. So I don't think it is impossible to come to the faith. Coming to the faith need not necessarily mean that you accept Ram as that is given to you by somebody else. You can construct your own Ram because that is guided by your faith and your solutions.
Just start a footnote to his previous answer about the Ramayana. He's working on a Sarada Ramayana, as he calls it. And one of the fascinating things about a few excerpts from which I read was to view Lanka as an urban civilization. And through the eyes of Hanuman, you see why things have gone wrong. in the way Lanka is constructed as a city and how the residents of Lanka have organized their lives. Prasanna, the other question I had for you, I mean, Prasanna is very clear that whatever he's trying to do has to be outside the realm of political parties. It has to be a non-political party-based movement. Can you say more about why you feel that way?
You know, even political parties, at least for the last 4 decades, if not more, have been winning their elections not on economic issues, not even on administration issues. They have been winning elections on cultural issues. You go back to the Assam elections, you go back to Andhra where Congress was defeated by N.T. Ram Rajya. You go back to any of those, or Punjab for example. How did the Punjab crisis blow up? It was all cultural. So culture has come to dominate Indian life. Indian people somewhere deep within feel a very deep cultural crisis, and that has become even more dominant than the economic crisis. The poor people are more bothered about identity issue, language issue, cultural issue than about economic issue. Of course they are bothered about economic issue. I am not saying not. But their concern with these issues is so much, and we have not tried to answer that. We have not tried to find the right solutions for that. And I'm saying all this not as just a social activist. I'm saying this as a theatre person. I must tell you this, in 91, when this Ram temple movement was happening, I was in Delhi and I was working with the National School of Drama. I had to do a play there, and that is when I was talking to a lot of my friends who were very worried with this sudden explosion of this right-wing thing. I agreed with them, but I told them that, look, please separate Ram from the Ram Mandir issue. We have not understood Ram. So that's when I decided, all right, I will do that. And that's when I took up Uttar Ramcharit, Bhavabhuti's great Sanskrit classic, and I decided to produce it. I produced Uttar Ramcharit in 91. In 92, when I was again called to the National School of Drama to direct another play, by then the temple had, the masjid had come down, and I decided to do Gandhi as a play. So these two productions of mine, 91 Uttar Ramcharit and 92 Gandhi, are the two theatre productions which actually made me realize the question of faith, the question of some of the questions which I am talking to you now.
So you brought up Gandhi. How much of Gandhi is present in what you're doing now? And how much of it is from outside Gandhi? Because you one can easily think it's neo-Gandhian. What is particularly new about this? We've heard Gandhi say this before on the question of faith and politics, on the question of rural autonomy, on the question of integrated technology, and a whole range of issues. You're raising them now in 2013. How have you handled the demands of newness?
When I wanted to do this play in 92, I didn't have a script. I mean, the few scripts that were there were very, very bad. And so this director of the National School of Drama was very worried and said, look, where is the play? And then, the situation is not so conducive. I said, don't worry about it. And I went to the students and told them something. I said, look, you're all from the plastic age, including me. I was born in 51, so even I am a post-Gandhi person. And you are definitely post-Gandhi, but not only post-Gandhi, but you belong to the plastic age. So let us start an improvisation where these group of students come to the stage and say, we belong to the plastic age, but we want to understand Gandhi. And then I had constructed just one fictional character of a teacher. She's a wonderful human being and a great teacher. They're all in love with her. And then they want to do an improvisation on Gandhi. And foolishly, they have, one of them has got this Godse's text, which is a banned text. And very, in a very silly, simple way, they take this to this teacher and say, ma'am, we want to do an improvisation on this Godse text. She's horrified, she's petrified. She's trying to hush it up and say this, no, and all that. They say, no, man, you just want to try. So the play starts like this, and then it gets into the Gandhi trial, and then gets into attacks. And gets into attacks because the actor who has to play the lawyer of Gandhi, this thing, wants to take the other role, the government lawyer's role. And like this, all sorts of things happen. And that way they start exploring Gandhi, and eventually it ends with the Tagore, this untouchability fast of Gandhiji, 1936, where Tagore came and gave him food. So actually, in my case, I don't know whether I'm a Gandhian or not. I've been a Marxist, I've been a non-believer, I had lost my faith for a few decades, but I'm seriously, as seriously as everybody sitting in this auditorium is wanting to, I'm also wanting to regain faith, but regain it on my terms. And I'm going to do that. But beyond that, I don't know.
Prasanna, for those of you who do not know his trajectory, in the late 80s he goes to Hegodu, a village near Shimoga, to do theatre, and a few years later he sets up a women's cooperative for handloom. And since then he's been involved in the struggle, and he's writing many books on desi food culture, traditional food practices, and let us abandon machines. And these are not, as the title suggests, only about those things. You open that, there will be some local myth being used to apply to an economic predicament. And in your own movement, Prasanna, there was this fabulous deity from Kadak called Bhimava, who is seen spinning at a wheel. It's a mid-19th century deity. And she's not a subaltern deity. She's a major deity of 3 districts. The entrances will have her only at the top. And he was using that to see why, you can do an iconographic interpretation of how she's sitting down wearing simple clothes, no jewelry, all of that. But then he was trying to see how a culture of work had actually had a serious place in tradition. And since then on, you've explored other cultural voices or figures that have talked about work, bodily work. And how has this meant, going back to the village and these things?
A little after I did Gandhi, I was getting sick of the city. I was in Delhi. I was a freelance theatre person, so you would be there, here, there, all over. I even had to do a television job. I was the chief executive of Indian television company, ITV, for a couple of years. And then left it and went to Hegodu. I went to Hegodu because it was a theatre village. But then after I went to Hegodu, I realized you can't just be doing theatre sitting in a village. You have to relate to the village. After all, you have 24 hours. You don't have just 3 hours. So that's when I started thinking of doing something. That's when I decided to do this charkha, start the charkha and all that. And in the last 15 years, handloom has taken me to all sorts of places in the village. And this Bhimava, for example, I have been moving in Gadag and Bagalkot and these areas, and always I used to see this little temple where perched on the top of the temple is a little doll of a woman who is actually, put in a sari like yours, ilkal sari, and she's spinning. And I was wondering, how can there be this, there is this woman spinning and she's supposed to be a lady and all that. And then I asked somebody, they said, no, ye to wahi hai. They told me where it is. It was very close by. I went there, and now this Bhimava is a 20th century person. 19th? No, she was born in, 19th century. 19th century. She was born 50 years before Gandhiji. She's a shepherd woman. Her name was Bhimava. And she, all her life, used to go to other women and tell them to spin. Just imagine, we don't know about it. We only know about Gandhiji. from 1905 to for about 20-30 years, this woman used to go to. Of course, she also is supposed to have had miraculous powers, and she's supposed to have cured things and all that, which is what made her into a deity. But her image is that of a spinning woman. Her temple, the prasad that is given is the yarn, handloom yarn, and the sari is given to her in this thing. It is an amazing thing, and I have found so many such histories and tales and songs and deities and all that which we never knew. And so sometimes I feel that I have wasted the first 3-4 decades of my life, directing plays in Bombay and then going to Delhi and directing some play and then doing something else and all that. India is an amazingly rich country. It's an extraordinary country.
So in this discussion of Rama and Gandhi, a question you would have confronted is the question, how is this discussion, how will it seem to those who don't see themselves as Hindus? And how are they to connect with this concern of yours?
Look, every one of us are trying to confront it. Let's not be, nobody is a fool. Somebody wants to talk as Marxist, somebody wants to talk as a Lohite, somebody wants to talk as something else, somebody wants to talk as a scientist, as a social scientist. We are all talking, we are all wanting to resolve this issue. What I am trying to say is, Indian people, especially the poor people, the village people, have taken Ram, and Ram had a lot of problems. The way he treated his wife, the way he treated this, all of them they knew. The peasants, the poor peasant knew all this, they have loved him. And it's a very profound love. It's a very profound love, and the whole Indian politics seems to be divided between two ways of looking at Ram. Till 1947 we looked at Ram as the epitome of Gram Swarajya, and 1990 onwards we have looked at Ram as Brahminical, as casteist, as somebody who will represent extreme form of religiosity and this thing. So we have to make a choice, and I am trying to say that we should make a choice. We should, and that choice is a wonderful choice because it also answers the other problems, the other crises that this country is facing.
You mentioned the fondness for Ram among the poor. Do you see parallel between what you're doing with the liberation theology movement in the 60s in Latin America, where they say Christ was a poor man and they try to build a movement around Christ?
Latin America is very much like India, and in Latin America, much before we started thinking on these lines, they started thinking on those lines. The liberation theology thing started 5-6 decades back, and I have recently read a book where Cuban president Fidel Castro is talking to a liberation theology priest. It's an amazing book. In the book, Fidel Castro is talking about his mother, and he says how the mother had put a cross on his body. And then, he goes on talking about, he constantly talks about Marxism, about socialism and all that, but keeps coming back to Christ. And then in one particular moment, he very clearly tells this priest that, look, if you are talking about Christ in the first 200 years of Christianity, I am a Christian. But if you are talking of Christ after that 150 years, he says, I am not a Christian. It's amazing, we all know these things. For example, whether it is the Sikh movement, the Gurudwaras, or the Veerashaiva movement here, it is so amazing. The Veerashaiva movement, for example, the revolution happened thrice. The first revolution happens in 12th century, where Basavanna takes the lead, and then it again becomes Brahminical, and after 200 years, 300 years, a second revolution happens. Most of you don't know about it, a second revolution happens, and in this second revolution, interestingly, the ones who do this revolution is another saint, and he takes the role, not a new role, but the same role. One of them becomes Allama, the other becomes Prasanna, and they recreate the whole drama, and they try to set the social ball rolling. And the third one happens a few centuries later. So this is how the poor people have been resolving social issues. This is how poor people have been leading their revolutions. Unfortunately, we, for a while, believed in blood revolutions and legalistic revolutions, where we thought that we will all take over and we will all legally distribute land or legally distribute property, and then beautiful revolution will last forever. It will not last forever. I mean, we saw it in the case of Soviet Union, we saw it in the case of many of the European countries. It collapses. If you don't have the moral authority strong enough, no system will work.
What is in the early stages of this movement you're trying to cultivate support for? What is exciting about it, and what do you see as possible difficulties you may have to encounter?
The most exciting thing is that we are part of an organization called Gram Sangh, and this Gram Sangh is a sort of a federation of constructive workers. Constructive workers means people who are working with handlooms or agriculture or with education or something like that. And we are getting a lot of young people from the city, software engineers and people who are, they come to the village, they want to work with us, they want to join with us, and so we have started with them, and I am very hopeful. In fact, this movement is going to be a young movement. It's not going to be old people. Many people think that young people are not coming. Why should young people come if you don't give them something concrete to hold? The problem is when young people come, we just keep on talking to them. We don't give them concrete things to hold. In Hekudu, for Charkha's sake, we have constructed this Shramajivi ashram. It's a training ashram. Because village women come from all sorts of places, and we had to create a situation where they could live and work and all that. So many young urban people are coming there. They live there. They do Shramadan in the morning, and breakfast they had to cook themselves, and I cook with them, and they're happy. And they spend 2-3 days. They exchange ideas. They become part of the movement, and it's going on.
Stop our this question. We'll open it up to the audience. Yes.
Mr. Prasanna, thank you very much. You made some quite controversial points. I'm sure they'll come up for discussion. I want to take you on the words that you used but did not explain, which is Gram Swarajya. And as I understand it, Gram Swarajya is about giving power to the people. And in the Indian Constitution, we do have provision for the Panchayat and the Gram Sabhas. There are states in India, like in Tamil Nadu, for example, where the Gram Sabha, the village Panchayats have become very strong, and where everybody has a voice. And I've also been reading about possible political development where politics goes down, where people are organizing these low level, the bottom, to get power, rather than do it the way in which you have described it. I wonder if you want to say something about this.
You're right, sir. We have adopted the name Gram Swaraj in our Panchayat Raj bill, and we refer to Gram Swaraj as the running of these panchayats, the village panchayats and Jilla panchayats and Taluk panchayats and all that. But Gram Swaraj, as defined by and as tried by the earlier leaders in Gandhiji, is that village which is not an old village, but it's a new village with new ideas, and yet which practices the hand-making trade. Gandhiji is very clear on that. What you produce and what you work on should be handmade. That's why we've been using this new word, handmade. And during Gandhiji's time, 80% of India was hand-making people. Today it has become 60% of the people. 60% of the Indian population is still hand-making people. Unfortunately, what we are doing is, we are trying to make these 60% hand-making people to quit their hand-making professions and run to the city and become part of this, slave groups of this thing. And what we are saying is, they were producing. Unfortunate that our GDP cannot construct their production, they cannot calculate their production. They have been producing, they have been living happily. Why are we pulling them into Bangalore? And why are we trying to get water from Tungabhadra, from Krishna and all over to Bangalore and make this into a horrible, unlivable city? You see, Gram Swaraj is that where you allow a peasant to be handworking. You allow a shepherd to be handworking. You allow a cowherd to be handworking. A handloom weaver to be handworking. Of course, the economy will go down in terms of the profitability. But you will adequately get the social profits out of it, the cultural profits out of it, and we'll have to readjust. See, what is this nonsense of, calculating profits only monetarily? How can you calculate human happiness or human happiness index, as some people have been saying, only on money? So Gram Swaraj is a much deeper philosophy than just village panchayats.
So in a city like where we are, how would we as most of us live here, how would we implement Gram Swarajya in a city?
This is a very interesting question. It is the most often asked question, because people get frightened when they are confronted with this notion of Gram Swaraj. They feel that they will have to give up everything and dash to the village. No. I have, for example, even now I have not given up everything, but I have given up a few things, and giving up the smallest thing, let us say your mobile. Some people will have to give up one of the 3 mobiles. It will start a chain reaction. And some people may have to give one of their 4 cars or the 5th refrigerator or something. And you suddenly realize for 2 days you will feel it is impossible. And then you start enjoying it. You may start walking, you may start doing things. You may start going occasionally to this thing. You may start buying something handmade. You may start... you see, there are many ways in which you can do that.
It's very difficult, because I'll tell you why. I've been thinking we're too big as a city. So I was thinking maybe if you take a ward, it becomes more manageable. So I've been trying to see what I can do in my own ward. And one of the things I was looking at is air pollution, because it's such a frightening thing. I think it's one of the biggest threats to urbanization. So looking at air pollution for the whole of Bengaluru becomes impossible. How do I handle it? So then if I look at just my ward, how would I handle air pollution for just... But then, it's very difficult because everybody's going through my ward.
True. That's precisely what I'm
see?
saying.
So it's
you
just...
don't even have to handle your ward. You have to handle yourself. You see, it is... Can I stop polluting a little, or can I pollute a little less as a self?
Yeah. So, what I started doing? I started walking. Where I used to take the car, but Sorry, I'm taking up too much time. This conversation
questions?
is, yeah.
Jai had a question.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. I was wondering if you could make. I was wondering if you could define for us some of the central tenets of your Hey Ram movement and make explicit how you aim to achieve Gram Swarajya.
Today, India is divided between Jai Ram, which is the slogan of the militant Hindu Rashtra people who are wanting to somehow make about 20% or even more than 20% of the population of this country as second citizens. For example, in the last 5 years, not one minority person has been given a seat to contest by the ruling party in many, many elections. What we are saying is that's a dangerous thing. Let's go to the other definition of Ram, which we have called as Hey Ram, which is internal, introspective, and which is non-violent. Where you tell even the BJP person to say that, look, why do you have to be so violent? Why can't you be a little moderate? Alright, you want to be a Hindu? Be a Hindu. We have no problem with your being a Hindu, but let us construct a nation which can coexist. So Hey Ram is the alternate to Jai Shri Ram. If I put it very simply.
Quickly.
This is just a quick comment, not a question, but you talked about the difference between a legal India and a moral India. And one could connect this to Octavio Paz's Nobel lecture where he says we privatize the quest for significance, and that is unleashing tribal passion. And perhaps, in a way, the brand of secularism we preach is actually bleeding fundamentalism. And Gandhi's notion of Gram Swarajya was to bring the quest for significance into the public realm, which is different from the Panchayati Raj thing that we're talking about today.
Yes, sir, I completely agree with you. And in fact, Gandhiji completely eliminates this distinction between a temple and Vidhan Sabha. For Gandhiji, where he lived, he was religious. Where he lived, he was also a politician. So it's, it is something so amazing and so simple. Why do we have to separate it? Why do we, for example, make our gods stay with our women in the dark corners of the room beyond the kitchen? And why? The moment we get out of the house, we say that no moral bounds for me. If I have to get people corrupt, I'll get people corrupt because I am a man. So Gandhiji said, I am a woman. So I am both myself and the social self. This is what is Ramayana, You have to be both a social self and a private self. You have to be both Sita and a Ram. The Sitas of this world are not Sitas of the world anymore. They will have to learn the other thing and vice versa. So, it's basically a question of bringing a balance.
Ashwini.
Two things, Mr. Prasanna. All of us, I think, or most of us have admired Gandhi greatly for bringing about, for leading the freedom movement, for elevating our sense of dignity, for morally uplifting us. But the discipline that I've taught for a long time, political science, and there's a great deal of political theory there which is moral, ethical, which will raise the following objections to what you've said. And let's see what your responses will be. First, a polity is not a moral utopia. A polity is built around institutions. and we recognize that Gandhi was a great theorist of liberation, great theorist of how to resist colonial power, how to resist structures of domination, a great theorist who also implemented his ideas and could carry millions with him. Gandhi had no institutional theory. How the judiciary is to be constructed, how the legislature is to be constructed, how the elections are to be fought, how much power should be assigned to which institution. No polity can be run without institutions. We have to have some knowledge about or something to say about the institutions which will be the fundamental units of a polity. Whether you want to call it modern polity or not polity or some other polity, but polity cannot be run without institutions. It cannot be just movements, right? So that's one objection we have to, while admiring Gandhi for liberating us, elevating our spirit, and trying to bring about a moral transformation and getting us freedom. While admiring him for all that, we also see he has no theory of institution. So when Ambedkar says, or Nehru say, we have to write a constitution, the constitution is about, among other things, about legalities, about institutions. Ambedkar is not, of course not, doesn't admire Gandhi, because Ambedkar as a Dalit feels village is a cesspool. It's a cesspool for Dalits. He opposed local self-government, panchayats, because he argued that this way the upper caste would not only have social power, but it will also have political power through elections. So they will be doubly dangerous for Dalits. And a cesspool will become a bigger cesspool. Right? So the argument here is not that we don't admire Gandhi, and we owe our freedom to him in many ways. But he has no institutional theory. And the theory of political institutions, however wrong they might be, theory of political institutions in India has come from Gandhi and Nehru and Ambedkar. They are our institutional fathers. Okay, that's one set of objections. Second set of objections that modern social science will make to what you're saying is that the Gram Swarajya that Gandhi was trying to build, right, which you say made people and peasants happy, but it also was accompanied by infant mortality rate which was very high, a life expectancy rate in 1947 which is 38 or 39 years. We are at 74 years now. With modern medicine and all kinds of modern interventions, our life expectancy has gone up. Are we able to save our infants from dying? Gandhi has nothing to say about that. Gram Swarajya has nothing to say about that. Right? So the agrarian populism that is underlying your discourse, we have dealt with it for a very long time, and while we admire the moral spirit underlying this discourse, we just don't find any institutions there. We don't find any modes of dealing with disease, dealing with children dying, dealing with ourselves dying. Right? What do you have to say to that kind of objection to what you've said?
Thank you, sir. While Ram Mandir has become a political reality.
I'm with Hey Ram on you.
I know. While it has become a political reality, Hey Ram is just a dream. It has not become a reality. It did not become a reality even during Gandhiji's time. You are completely right that we cannot build big institutions and have Gram Swaraj. But the point is, very central to Gandhiji is deconstruction. Now, what is that deconstruction? How will it happen? Gram Swaraj is autonomous villages which are modern in the mind and traditional in the body. This is just a dream. I am dreaming of a village, or it will not be a village, it will be as sophisticated as this little place, but it will be handmaking and of the most modern ideas. This is a dream. If you ask me, you are just a dreamer and we have to do that, well, we start deconstructing ourselves. We don't know where it will lead to. You see, the other thing is, do we really have a choice? Do you really believe these institutions are delivering? You're right. You're right. These institutions can only be constructed on, on the Nehruvian lines and Ambedkar lines, or the Trump lines or Putin lines. But the thing is, we have all seen that these institutions have completely collapsed. They are not delivering, they are not functioning, they are not even delivering to the Dalits, they are not delivering to the poor. You see, we all have seen that the division between the poor and the rich has increased 100 folds. So what has science delivered? What has technology delivered? What has these big institutions delivered? So I am wanting to see something which is at least a dream. There I see a possibility. And if nothing, it will have helped my personal life, my personal lifestyle. I am happy.
I want to ask, why can't we marry Gandhi and Nehru? To the person who asked the question. Why can't we have Gram Swaraj and the institutions that were built by Panditji? Why can't they live together? Why can't we delegate from those institutions down?
Sir, is not Congress party a marriage between these two?
No.
In a sense it was. It failed. You can't marry the big with the small.
Congress party was never a marriage between these two.
Well,
Congress
anyway,
party was it was a Nehruvian
After
body.
47.
Hanji?
After 47.
After, I'm talking about after 47.
It seems to be Gandhi construct after.
Sure, a small footnote that may just make these two conversations not as disparate as they. Just by numbers, the number of families living off handloom, 44 lakhs. It used to be 64 lakhs in the mid-90s, now it's 44 lakhs. 24 lakh actively used handlooms. And the UPA policy document said this is a sunset industry. And there's no point supporting. So I think there's some way, it's not to say power mills ought to be regulated or shut down, but how do we do policy in a way that will allow for a diverse institutional matrix that will support some of these ideas also to
That's an institutional
live?
question.
It's an institutional question.
We need to think about institutions which will generate.
But it's an institutional question that will have Gram Swaraj as an animating idea.
Let me answer you in a very personal way. For the last 30 years, in Hegodu, I am trying to construct a thing called Charkha. It's a cooperative run by village women, and it is run profitably now. We don't get foreign funds, we don't get any funds, and it is run and it is growing. It gets about 15% growth every year. And we are trying to get the best urban systems, not machines, but minus the machine, all the best systems. All my friends who are you're all welcome to come there and contribute to this thing. We are trying that out. There are many people trying it out. In India, unfortunately, what I call the constructive workers, we have not cared for them. They have got, they went in the 70s. They went to the rural areas, they went to different sectors and got lost there. We have not bothered about them. Newspapers don't talk about them. Television channels don't talk about them. And they have not come together. There are experiments happening.
Just a good example, NID design students, he constantly talks about why the urban and the rural need not be an antagonistic relationship. Can they absorb the best from each other in this sort of sense? Talent.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it is not, yes. Yes.
I have a question for Prasanna. I have listened to Anna Hazare and subsequently Arvind Kejriwal. He's a very regular
Speak into
visitor
the
to
mic.
Bangalore. So, are there any lessons for you from the whole 7 or 10 years of movement of Anna Hazare, and whether they can be applied? I'm very fascinated by your concept and your clarity of thought. And you say it's a public movement and anybody can take it up. That's one thing at our age we are seriously looking at. But at the same time, the failure of the whole up movement is very painful because we believe at a certain point that it's going to be a game changer. So we want to put our belief in you. So have you taken those things into your work? Thanks.
I'm not giving a very considered opinion because I have really not thought about it. But sorry, what I'm saying may be wrong. I greatly admire Anna Hazare's village work. I think it's extraordinary. But his effort to unite India on on the issue of corruption was wrong. Corruption is not a moral problem. Corruption is a systemic problem. You know, for example, village people become corrupt because they are out of the system. There is no way a villager, poor villager, can exist unless he or she pays bribe. So, you know, in a heterogeneous situation like this, to take up issue of corruption and then think that you are going to liberate this country, I think it was a flop. But otherwise, I admire that man and what he has done in his village.
Kalpana. Oh, Chiranjeev.
See, between these two opposing approaches, can we find a way through Tagore? Well, I feel the first half of the 20th century belonged to Gandhi, the second to Ambedkar, and the synthesis you can find in Tagore. His work in community development, you are familiar with, and what he wrote about community development could have been written yesterday by somebody from the Niti Aayog. And also the moral dimension, which is there in Tagore, probably is, and going back to nature, more relevant to our times. So would Tagore be the figure for the 21st century? And as far as Ram is concerned, you see, he's revered as Maryada Purushottam. Now, the problem is, where do you draw the Maryadas now, given our situation?
Sir, I agree with you that there are a lot of lessons we have to learn from Tagore, and especially from Tagore's experimentation with Sriniketan. We only know about Shantiniketan, but what he did with Sriniketan and with agriculture, with other things, is truly extraordinary, and we haven't given enough attention to that. Now, the second question of Maryada Purushottam, you very rightly put it. Maryada is Sabhyata. That's why I said Ramayana is the only epic which makes its core theme as Maryada, as Sabhyata. So I totally agree with you.
I have a point. Yeah. You're saying that. You're saying that Jai Ram is the icon of the BJP, whose aim is to build Hindu Rashtra, and that's pretty well known to people. And surprisingly, in the elections you find, the BJP has been voted, with Muslim majority areas have voted the BJP. That's point number one. And second point I would like to make is, this is a wonder how this has happened. Muslims do perceive that they are discriminated against, and yet they have voted BJP for power. Second point is, the Hindu Rashtra dream is not not going to work at all. India is too diverse, and basically Indians, all communities, all religions, basically they are tolerant. They are not militant in their outlook. It will not succeed. So, can you react to this? 2 points.
Sir, I'm glad to hear what you're saying, and sometimes I also feel like that. But the point is, this idea of a Hindu Rashtra or a Muslim Rashtra or a Catholic Rashtra, the amount of damage it does culturally in the minds of the ordinary people is immense, and that is what is worrying. Politically, I'm not so bothered. They come, they go. They come for all sorts of reasons.
In the context of the moral universe of Gandhi that has collapsed today, and the trajectory that we have chosen from after independence, said in the context of collapse of a moral universe that Gandhiji spoke about, and the trajectory of development that we have chosen from 1947 onwards, where do you see perhaps a possible recovery of that moral universe? Where do you see that? And to just comment on the gentleman who spoke before, can we not marry Nehru and Gandhi? I think they are incompatible in the sense that, you know, the worldviews were totally different. Whereas Gandhiji believed in a smaller universe, where Nehru's vision was much larger and much more modern. And I think that's why it is not possible to marry them both. But my question is to really see, where do you see this possibility of a recovery?
You know, the problem is not a moral recovery. I think we are all still deeply morally bound people. The problem is we have divided the moral world from the material world. We handle material world separately and the moral world separately. And what Gandhi advocated and also practiced was a complete unison of the moral and the material world. What we need to do is we have to be moral in the material world and material in the moral world. You can't say women will take care of the gods and men will take care of the corrupt system. No. The men will have to be women in that sense and women will have to be men in the sense that they take, we acknowledge that they take the responsibilities, you know.
I think what you have been talking about is about the path of development that we have proceeded on, and we have gone further and further away from the Gandhian notion of development. Gram Swarajya is a decentralized concept, whereas we have gone completely in the opposite direction of more and more centralization. Then you talk about cooperation, you are talking about cooperatives. We have left that idea also behind and we are going into competitiveness and competing with each and every one is competing. Then, so you also talked about the moral universe, which also we have left behind and gone to a practical kind of life. So have we gone too, the whole world has changed. The neoliberal approach and the clutches of the entrepreneurial class as against the socialism which we had during the 20th century. So, now it's completely different. We are in the clutches of the entrepreneurial corporate groups, class. So, will we ever be able to change in the direction that you are talking of? It seems a Herculean task.
We are only talking of an ideal model, and I projected Ram as the model because Ram, as the ruler, as the administrator, would go to the extreme moral position before administering the state. For example, when the washerman made this silly accusation against Sita, he could have punished him. Today's politician would have not just punished the washerman, but the entire community of washermen. As we have seen, and I don't want to give you examples, but Ram did not even punish that individual washerman, and he punished himself and his wife. That's where I say the wife and the husband, though they are treated as two separate, they are the same. Ram, when he has to punish himself, he has to punish Sita. It's a very, very, touching thing. That's why I'm going back to Ramayana. Otherwise, these ideas that you very correctly put, they can be defined in Buddhist ways, for example, non-discriminatory way of living and all that, in Chinese ways, in every way. But for India now, we have a way, we have a model, which is Ram, who is moral while administering the state. Buddha did not administer the state. Buddha left administering the state and became a monk. Basavanna left administration and became a monk. They did great things. They gave great ideas. But Ram was the only fellow who remained an administrator. And all his life he suffered as an administrator. The most touching thing about Ramayana is, after Ravana's death, the husband and wife never lived together. Never ever lived together. And he went on doing administration. And this this is part of his moral thing.
We've got 3 questions and we respond together.
Okay. How can Rama then be called a Maryada Purushottam? This is something I have never been able to understand. He did so many wrongs.
Should we not portray this as a binary between the handmade versus the industrial? Because then that gets misconstrued as a Luddite nostalgia versus technical progress. Should we, well, perhaps the way forward is to recognize that the progression from the handmade to the industrial to the digital is a progressive process of disembodiment. And it's actually, if you look at the body as the primary site of discovery and learning and perhaps the only site for the integration of the moral and the material, then from that perspective we can reconstruct our modern world. And I ask you this because as a theatre person you're perhaps best positioned to understand embodied knowing.
I agree with you, but the thing is, in India already the metaphor of Ram has been accepted by the whole population, by political parties. So, whether we like it or not, we'll have to define India vis-a-vis Ram. Otherwise, what you said is what I believe, what most of us believe. Now, coming to the question of the Maryada of Ram, even the most pious Ram Bhakta scholars, for example, like Right Reverend Srinivas Shastri, could not explain it. If you look at Ram and Sita as separate beings, his behavior is unpardonable. The only way you can understand it is if you look at Ram and Sita as the 2 aspects of the same personality. One is the Purusha aspect of you, the other is the Prakriti aspect of you, and as a civilization, you are constantly hurting your Prakriti aspect. And as a civilization, you are constantly hurting the Prakriti. Not your own Prakriti, but also the Prakriti around you. If you look at it this way, then you can understand it. And that's why I say Ramayana is not a story of marriage. It's a story of love. The greatest love story ever written anywhere in the world. I don't want to treat it as marriage. The two are so profoundly in love with each other.
So actually, I think you misheard Prem's question. He articulated what you've always articulated.
I know. I totally agreed with him. I did not disagree with him.
I thought you said that.
No.
Response.
No, I said,
Prasanna
but you have to define this in terms of the metaphor of Ram because that's what has been already done by the others.
Here, Prasanna, whatever little has been, a lot has been said, but it's little compared to what could be said outside national debates and all that. Do you realize there is difficulty in this metaphor, Rama? Some difficulty is there. You say that's well accepted and all that, but even then, are you aware that this metaphor is open to certain kind of criticism which will make it rather difficult to accept by many people who otherwise may be with you on what you are trying to do. For example, if the central issue, as I can see, is the divergence or divorce between morality or morals and worldly life, I think most of us, or many people, you see, worldly life, as you just now mentioned, is treated differently. There, certain compromises are permitted. You have to do. If you want, inverted commas, succeed, then you have to do this. This is the way of the world. And then to perhaps balance it, a half an hour puja or 1 hour puja or a few pujas to here and there will balance it. But that is not the way it will. See, the question of institutions also as a very relevant issue. But the point is, who manages those institutions? Institutions are necessary, but individuals are from it. in the individual life, morality is divorced from the other activities, daily activities, then these problems will come up. So, do you think that that could also be one of the themes in your narrative, rather than only this? I see some problems in this metaphor.
Rajiv.
You are very correct. We are actually trying to be skeptical, and a lot of skepticism actually going on. Although we listen to, everything that you talk to the idealist sort of discourse, we all completely share that. But at the same time, we are always tempted to go back to the practical, the immediate environment and the kind of discourses with which we are surrounded, the everyday discourses. The question of institutions, the question of science, everything actually comes up and haunts us. Then how do we then go with this idealistic vision? But at the same time, I actually find there are ample room for scope. Like for instance, we are also living, as you rightly pointed out, we are also living in a time of growing realization about the failure of the institutions, about the limitations of the science. We are also actually coming up with new discourses. What actually remains beyond that, beyond institutions, beyond science, and beyond our commonsensical world. And where I think the society by and large, although they might be actually driving according to the traffic, along with the traffic, they are also looking for some alternative points. And there are several mindsets which might not be completely operational, but still actually are looking forward towards some knowledge framework. But then we don't have alternatives. We don't have, like for instance, within this small room, we get this idealistic vision. We get a new program, and the new program is not completely, operationalized. What exactly do we need to operationalize it? We need actually a new discourse that will actually go beyond science, which will actually tell us in very commonsensical language that science is not the limits. There's something much more beyond science. So I think we need to literally or radically convert the visions into certain missions. So what would you actually respond?
Firstly, when you're in a conversation, you should not try to answer all the questions, because it's not possible. For example, the political scientists asking about the systems, I have no answer. But then, it's also silly that you will not put your step forward till all questions are answered. That is a silly thing to do. And that's where Gandhiji talks of Satya. If you have realized something very, very profoundly inside as truth, you have to put your foot forward. Don't just stand there and keep on, hallucinating about it. You have to put your foot forward. And don't worry about which will be the 100th step. The 100th step is not going to come to you. The step that comes to you is the second step, that's all. So all these questions, I have no answer. And I am very, very happy to be saying that I am ignorant about.
Very good. Okay. Ashur, a point, and then Madhu, and then we'll have to close.
Yeah. I've already spoken. If there's some time left, I'll speak at the end. But
do you have a mic? Okay, please.
I'm not going to ask you a question as such, Prasanna, but I understand and I totally identify with both the despair and the dream. That you were saying it's a dream, and I think it's absolutely essential for all of us to have at least a dream or an alternative, especially in these kind of times that we're living in. But when you talk of the whole thing of Hey Ram, as opposed to Jai Ram, but and despite all my questions also, about Ram as the Maryada Purushottam Ram, I do have those questions also, but I'll keep those aside for the moment, because I do see the need to hold on to some kind of a holistic ideal. Okay, and you say that Ram epitomizes that kind of a holistic ideal which brings together the politics and morality, the mind and the body, Purusha and Prakriti. So it's a kind of holistic, vision of state and the personal realm, the public realm and the personal realm. So even to go by that, but looked at the times that we're living in. On the one hand, she spoke about, we've gone so far, in terms of the kind of development model that we have adopted, in terms of the kind of globalization that we're seeing around us today, which is kind of eating up and really eating up all that is local and all that is handmade, appropriating all that is local and handmade. So there is a huge disruption that has happened also in the moral and in the personal realm. To the extent like when you say, it was Jai Ram, we should also remember it was not just, it's not just Jai, it was earlier. I think the kind of, it was not only Hey Ram, I'm bringing in another kind of greeting that used to be there, which was Jai Siya Ram. So the greeting was really Jai Siya Ram, which was to acknowledge the unity of, Sita and Ram. And today, what do they say? They say Jai Shri Ram. So Sita has been exiled permanently and forever. Okay? So all that Sita kind of epitomizes, that has been totally destroyed. So in the context of that kind of a destruction and a disruption, the kind of which the politics has really achieved, which in a way has tried to marry politics and religion. Gandhi famously said, those who try to separate religion from politics understand neither religion nor politics. So which he might have been right in. But in today's context, I think a force like the right wing, that we see today, has understood this potent mix very well, and has totally disrupted that kind of holistic moral universe that was also able to kind of envision institutions and administration in a more kind of holistic way. So in this context of this kind of disruption, what is your source of hope? What is your source of hope for to heal this kind of disruption? Because this kind of disruption, as you said, has also generated so much of poison. Are we able to recover any of that vision? Is my question. I want to. No, I think all of us need to. But what I would like to understand, what is your hope? Where do you draw your hope from?
But the two fingers is precisely about this.
Okay.
That Ram is one of the greatest civilizational figures of India is beyond doubt. That Ram is one of the greatest civilizational figures is beyond doubt. That Ram can be read as Maryada Purushottam with this very clever analytical intervention. Namely, the Ram and Sita are not separate. So when Sita is sent to Vanvas, then Ram is punishing himself also. Because the two are individual. This is a very clever analytical move here, which can restore Ram as Maryada Purushottam, but no feminist would agree with that. Absolutely not. Right. Deeply unjust to Sita, what happened. Right. But at any rate, the larger question that follows from all this is, if the greatest mobilizer of people in 20th century, or one of the great, I think the greatest, Mahatma Gandhi, could not use Ram as a metaphor for unity, tried, and some people, Muslims couldn't accept him. Muslims could not accept. You read so much of Jinnah are unwilling to accept. You can say he's wrong. You can. Ramu Gandhi used to say.
1936 is the line of divide. Before that, the Muslims accepted. 1936 onwards.
That is not true.
Right.
After the breakdown of the Khilafat movement, there is clearly a separation emerging between Hindus and Muslims in politics. Gandhi or no Gandhi. Gandhi tries his best. And he is unable to make Rama acceptable to everyone. Ram as a metaphor, even as Hey Ram, which I like, even the compassionate Ram, even the greatly compassionate, the Maryada Purushottam is unable to unite everyone in India, given India's diversities, religious diversity. So how do you hope to unite them with Hey Ram? Gandhi couldn't do it.
No, Prasanna, if I can answer this for you, Prasanna was saying different things, many of them at cross purposes. There's one social program he has, Ram as the icon against which you should mobilize. Then he's saying this business of finding what one's morality ought to be is a profoundly individual affair. In which case this social program will seem like an imposition of sorts. I think there's both. I could hear both being said here. I'm not sure how you have worked that out.
Yes. Ram is called Chauda Kala Sampurna and Krishna is called Sola Kala Sampurna. So perfection, the model of perfection is Krishna in Indian tradition, not Rama.
But he's a playboy. That's the problem. He's not Maryada Purushottam.
Okay. Raman and Vishnu, we should close with the last question.
It's coming.
To continue where Ashutosh left, yeah, he was a great mobilizer. I'm a student of history. Sorry, I'm a student of history, so yeah. But he was not a very good economist, unfortunately, Gandhi. For one thing, capitalism came much before Gandhi arrived in India. Colonial capitalism had taken roots. And therefore the structures were already in place. So this whole notion of Gram Swarajya, this idealized village communities, were already on the way out, whether in rural India or urban India. Industries were well in place, and a capitalist class had emerged. So the structure that we see post-independence, this is with reference to the observation that you made, the emerging conflict between Gandhi and on one side and Nehru and Ambedkar and Patel on the other. It had roots going back in time, So,
sir, you have raised a very important issue. Gandhi had to be post-machine, post-automation. Marx had to be post-automation. The drawing line is between the hand-making machine and the automatic machine. You have to start understanding all these issues from the day automation begins and what it does to human beings, what it does to our morality, what it does to our society. You see, in a very fundamental philosophical sense, the machine is making you obsolete. It is now happening. Maybe it will happen after 20 years or 30 years when they take over even intelligence. But it started happening when the automation started. And all the crises and all the good things, what you consider as good things, the economic bounty happens with the machine, and the moral collapse begins with the machine. Right. But this, I am not suggesting that the society earlier to it was a beautiful society. Gandhiji does not say that. Gandhiji keeps saying that I am not talking of the old village. He keeps saying that I am talking of a new village. So we have to accept all the wonderful thoughts that have emerged post-machine. We are not rejecting modernism. No, we are not rejecting modernism. We are accepting modernism of the mind. The most extraordinary, the women's liberation happens post-machine. Socialism happens post-machine. So many other things happen post-machine. So we are going to accept it. That's what, incidentally, Chiranjeev Singhji said. Tagore. You see, Tagore is so extraordinary. Tagore talks of a world where he says, ekla chalo re. That is, you be driven by your mind. But Tagore, at the same time, is not interested in you being driven by a machine. So this distinction between machine and the mind is very crucial to what we are discussing. And today, I'm sorry we don't have the time to do that, but hopefully we'll do it some other day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prasanna.
Mr. Prasanna, we've had one of the most profoundly disturbing